Okay, you may begin at your discretion.
Great. Thanks, Sean. All right, welcome tonight to everybody to the Design Review Board meeting for May 18th. We have a quorum with 4 members since we only have a 7-member panel. So we are good to get started. Do I hear a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Have a motion. Do we have any meeting minutes to approve, staff, for this last board meeting?
Yes, you do.
All right. So do I hear a motion to approve last full board meeting minutes?
It's several meeting minutes. Would you like me to tell you?
Well, you guys have it for the record. I think we've all reviewed them. So do I have a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes? More than likely is what they are.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Do all of those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And then now I'm looking for any general member comments. These are general member comments that do not apply to any applications tonight. I don't believe anyone registered with staff, but if you have a general member comment, then great. I also just want to remind everybody, so I don't have to go over it every time, we have a couple of appeals tonight. Appeals, first we'll start with the applicant or the appellant submitting what their appeal is, why they are appealing, and they need to prove of 2 things: whether a guideline was misapplied or whether new information has been introduced to the project. So those are the 2 critical things. You need to prove one of those, and then we will vote on whether the appeal will be heard, and then we will hear the case over again, and that's where the actual applicant, unless they are also the appellant, will then present their application. I know there was some confusion on our last board meeting about kind of the process, so I just want to make sure that everybody's kind of clear on how that works. So with that said, we're going to get into tonight's agenda, which is going to start at 2228 Wake Robin Lane.
Michael, there's a hand raised, and I'm not sure if they have a comment for members' comments.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We can unmute them. I think it's Bob. Hi, Bob. Did you have a comment for members' comments?
Yes, I did. Good evening, and thanks for taking my comments. Michael, one of the things that as a general member comment is I would like the Design Review Board to consider, I don't know how you would go about it, but a recommendation that if a clusters board or a neighborhoods board has submitted an application that would have an impact on the entire neighborhood, such as a large number of tree removals or a large project that affects every member of the community, that there be some method. And if that board chooses to not communicate with its members, either via open meetings or newsletters or what have you, then I would like there to be some type of a notification provided to the general membership of a cluster or an association when such an application is received by the DRB. So members could have the opportunity to register as effective parties. Basically, if it's done in secret, like unfortunately our board tends to do, and we only have to find out it after something's done.
Yeah. So, sir, I do know we have a process that the cluster staff does make sure that the cluster has sent out and proves that there has been notification sent out when there is a overall kind of cluster project submitted to us. So I know Cam and his staff work diligently on making sure that does happen, whether it is by a newsletter or whether it's by a joint email that's sent out to the cluster or whatever. But I do know I see those in the applications when we get them. So I do believe it's part of our process, and what I'll do is I'll make sure that staff is double verifying that is occurring on all those types of applications. So we make sure to address your concern.
I do believe that we need Bob's address.
Okay, Bob, if you could put in the chat just kind of what your address is, so that way staff can have it for the record. And if you could do that, that would be awesome. And then also that maybe they can follow up with what cluster you live in there, where you're having that issue. So moving into tonight's agenda, now we'll jump into 2228 Wake Robin Lane. So this is an appeal. I believe this one is the applicant is appealing. And I believe from what I was told, Mike B was on the original decision. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up my document here. Yeah, Mike B and Dan is not here. So Mike B cannot vote on the appeal. You'll have to defer. Yeah, so is the applicant here? Is either Jill or Gregory on?
I believe Jill is on. Let me unmute.
Here we go. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So
I'm Jill.
Hi, Jill. Just as a reminder, did you hear my little spiel about appeals and what you need to prove?
I did. Whether or not the guidelines were misapplied.
Correct. Whether a guideline was misapplied or whether there is some new information. So if you want to go at those two options, and then we will have any discussion or ask any questions we may have.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for having me here today. I'm new to this whole process, so hopefully I'm doing everything right. Please correct me if I missed any information. But we are appealing the decision of a 2-member panel regarding our patio on the front of our house at 2228 Wake Robin. And just to be clear, this patio was installed before we bought the house in July of last year. So we do consider the guidelines misapplied, and we've got a copy of the guidelines here. And in our opinion, and in the opinion of all of our neighbors, the patio does meet the guidelines. Flagstone is an approved material under the guidelines, which is all flagstone. The elevation of our patio is in conformance with the guidelines, and there are no other features that are prohibited by the guidelines. And that was discussed in the 2-member panel last time that the patio was not in harmony with the neighborhood, but we would refute that, and that on Wake Robin, everybody sits in their front yards because no one has open backyards. Everything is very wooded. So there are no less than 8 patios that resemble our same patio on the street, and everybody sits in their front yards on those patios. So we would argue that actually removing the patio would cause disharmony in the neighborhood because everybody gathers on this patio and in their patios as well. So if you need any additional details, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I was muted. So you're fighting that the application the guideline has been misapplied, that it is harmonious with the overall streetscape and is not and is of approved material. And I believe the decision is that it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, the decision says you guys disapproved it because it was not appropriate size for the area it was located, and consideration of its physical and visual impact on adjacent properties and the street.
Right, and it was in the front right side as opposed to in the rear of the home.
Yeah, like I wish it was on the left side, just because then it would be right by the walkway, and then I feel like it wouldn't be as I don't know, impactful with what it is.
We would argue that putting it on the left side, again, we didn't install this patio, but that would eat into you would see that from the front of the house, and it would be disharmonious. I think, if you look at the way that the house is, you've got the picture up now, you can barely see the patio. So, again, everybody, all of our neighbors, Ed and Stephanie, Richard, everybody has patios like this, including Richard himself, who's a member of DRB. So I think for us, we're just a little confused. Again, we're very new to this process, but when we look at the guidelines, it does conform to the guidelines. And everybody sits out there, all of our neighbors, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what's different between your house and most other people's houses is you don't have a front porch like most people do. So I mean, I from a guideline misapplied, I see where you're coming from, but let me go around the room and see if anyone else has any other kind of comments. Mike's, since you kind of reviewed it, I'm gonna jump over to Jim. Did you have anything? Do you feel like the guideline was misapplied here?
Does the homeowner have any pictures of similar situations in the neighborhood?
I mean, we could go take them. It's just that I mean, that should be something we didn't feel that it was right for us. There are 8 patios like this on this very short street. 8 patios that are very similar. I just felt a little uncomfortable taking pictures of the neighbors' houses and providing them, because I never know if other people, I don't know how they would feel about that, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've been going up and down the street view, and most of them are kind of integrated into their walkways. I mean, with all that said, I mean, I don't think that it's impactful on the streetscape as much as it doesn't. I don't think it sticks out. Bruce, what do you think from a guideline?
From my perspective, I didn't see it disharmonious. I was looking at the guidelines that is looking for these things to be it's a little close to the property line. So that's one thing that we look at. I understand, and I did not understand, and maybe we should have asked sooner, or if the question is harmonious with the neighborhood, then show us what's in the neighborhood. But by general appearance, however, I did not find it to be something that we could not approve.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. It's not built, it's built well. I mean, maybe there could be, a little screening or something between the neighbor, but I mean, I'm not gonna have heartburn over it one way or the other. I'd be willing to motion to accept the appeal that the guideline was misapplied, and that it is that the guideline of that it's not harmonious in nature with the location, that it is in fact harmonious. So I'll make a motion to accept the appeal. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Bruce. Mike B, just to remind you, you can't vote. So we'll take a motion to vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
For the record, Mike B defers.
And any nays? Jim, I don't think I heard a vote from you. You vote yay or nay?
I'm voting aye.
All right, great. So the motion passes to accept the appeal. So then we will hear the project anew. I think we're kind of already familiar with the project. So just to kind of speed it along, I'll motion to approve the patio as submitted.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Mike B, I think you can vote on this. If
I
you
can vote.
want.
I will abstain.
You'll still abstain. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So Bruce, did I hear a vote from you? Yay?
Yes, I said
know
aye.
you seconded. All right. So motion passes 3-0-1. So thank you, Jill, for attending tonight.
Thank you all. Do I have any due outs on my end?
No, you should get a letter in about a week from staff,
Okay.
just confirming the installation. But other than that, enjoy your patio.
Great. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Have
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, moving on to application G, which is 11905 Triple Crown Road.
If I could just
Can I-
explain this one really quick, Michael.
Yep.
So the homeowners here for the first portion is for an appeal on just the portico portion of the application that was previously approved. And the second application is for the siding color change.
Okay.
wanted to be
So
clear.
the first one is an appeal, and then the second one is an additional new application for the same address.
That is correct.
And we have affected parties on both applications.
That is correct.
And since it's two separate applications, we hear from them both times, I'm assuming, because we'll kind of restart the process for the second one.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. All right. So for the first one, I believe the appellant is Mr. Platt. Mr. Platt, are you on tonight?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. How are you doing, sir? Long time no see.
Long time no see. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Wood, and all the members of the DRB for the excellent manner in which you dealt with the situation with the pool and patio last month. It was a breath of fresh air and very much appreciated, so thank you. Regarding the situation here, we're simply saying that incomplete applications are to be returned to the applicant under your own application requirements. Second, we're saying that there were a lot of trees taken down. That's new information in order to make it possible to clear the whole backyard so that this large new structure, which is obstructing our view, could be built. And we're also saying that this really does obstruct our view and create something that was never supposed to be put in place there. The Collins asked 4 neighbors. Virtually none of the 4 have their backyards impacted. We have nothing against the Collinses, and we're delighted that they want to stay here and age in place. However, from our vantage point, we're now facing a large 2-story structure. Mr. Wood, you'll recall that last month when you asked whether the left side lower exposure was going to be simply crawl space with no window or door, you were told by the Collins is yes, that's correct. And you may recall that. That was 2 months ago. But in fact, now there's a window and a door in there on that left side elevation, which was never applied for. This was an incomplete application. The only thing we're asking for, given the way this has gone, is that we be screened by trees on the Collins's yard, so we don't have impact on this. The yard is now basically impacting us with potential noise, loss of privacy, with a lot of water drainage, because there are 2 large trees that have fallen down on the corner of the lot. We ask that those be removed, and we want screening, and we want to have the color application considered in the context of the fact that this is really a piecemeal application. It's nice that it's being applied for separately, but the way the system is supposed to work, you're supposed to come in with a complete application. That's never quite happened. And so we're not objecting to the Collinses. We're not objecting to the Collinses doing this. We are objecting to the manner in which it's being done. We also have concern about potential for additional HVAC equipment being located that hasn't yet been applied for. We want to get an assurance that there's nothing else going in that could make noise in our backyard. We also note that there's been a spotlight high up on the Collins's property that has been glaring into our yard and our kitchen when we cook in the evenings, and that is not permitted. And I hope that will only be an artifact of the construction period and will go away. Again, we have nothing against the Collinses, but we would argue that the guidelines have been misapplied by the way in which the process has worked, that the staff did not notice that even though the Collinses did put us in as one of the 2 properties that will be impacted by this, no one contacted us, and we didn't know until this was later. This is new information, and I would submit respectfully that the guidelines have been misapplied. Again, all we're asking for is consideration so that we are not adversely impacted by this large new structure that is not supposed to have been there under the original arrangement made for Evergreen Forest, where it was 1 building, 1 structure on 1 lot. This is new. And again, we're not objecting to what the Collinses want to do. We're simply saying we want to be considered in this process and have our privacy, our noise exposure, and our water impacts considered as this goes forward. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I do think there's a good cause to have an appeal and to have the Collinses asked to assert that they're not going to have any more alsos coming into the application, which is not supposed to be the way it works. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Mr. Platt. This one is a tricky one because I know I was on the original panel, I believe, that reviewed this. I think it was me and Karen. I don't know if there was a third. It sounds like it's because of grade or something. It's somewhat gotten taller. The tricky part is that we're only looking at the portico part of that. That is what is being appealed. What I'm curious is, staff, because it sounds like maybe some conditions have changed out on site with the height of the addition, and potentially some additional doors and windows being installed that were not on the left elevation. Even though it's not part of the portico that is being appealed, I'm assuming there's some due process with you guys following up on the final kind of install, in the sense that maybe we can request some of these, maybe some additional screening if we had known this was going to be double height structure versus a single story with a crawl space. And obviously I also looked through the first application. I don't see any lighting except underneath the portico itself. So if there's some additional lights that have been added, that those need to be applied for and put in underneath the kind of per our guidelines. Is there any sort of process for that stuff?
Yes, there's a process in place that we have a post-DRB inspector that identifies and inspects things that are not compliant with the DRB's decision.
So I guess what I would do is maybe just, flag this project. I think from an appeal for the portico, to me, that the portico is what's being appealed. So by definition, we can't we're not going to review the whole project de novo. That's just my opinion. We'll go around and hear it. But I would like, it does sound like, it's the project has grown a little bit in size. So I would like us to follow up and make sure that if it has in fact the information that's been presented tonight is the fact, that maybe we can look at maybe requesting some additional screening from, maybe some bushes or evergreens, hollies or skip laurels or something that'll grow and kind of help screen it. And then also maybe take a look at the lights. So if staff could just kind of note that in the application or in their file, that would be great. Mike B, did you have anything in reference to the appeal for the portico, which is what this is appealing?
No, I appreciate you bringing up and asking the question with regard to a, say, post-construction walkthrough, final inspection, et cetera, by staff. I think that would go a long way to alleviating some of these concerns and addressing some of these items. So I don't have any additional questions specific to the portico and this appeal. So
okay. Jim, did you have any questions about the application?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Bruce, did you have anything?
Well, I viewed the appeal as really addressing the already approved application, and it's still not clear to me what portion of the portico is the basis of the appeal. And so, I agree wholeheartedly to the extent that there's an as-built issue versus what was approved. Mr. Platt should understand, and the RA should address that, but I'm not sure that this appeal is the appropriate way to do it.
Yeah, I think I can explain kind of, I know with the application, because I was there for when we approved it, is the portico was not thought out very well at the time. So we requested them to come back with a better, more kind of detailed design for the portico part that was attached to the addition. And so we asked them to come back, so you can see it here that we approved it in concept only, and we wanted them to come back. And then that is when, at that point, I believe Mr. Platt was notified of this addition, and it was already past the application it was already past the appeal process for the actual addition itself. And so so that's where we're kind of where we stand at the moment. And I do, I've been out there. I do feel like it obviously is kind of in his backyard to a certain extent. So I understand the concerns that he does have, and that's why I'm hoping that staff can follow up on making sure that the height is, if it's significantly grown in height because of grade, sometimes that happens with the project, but we would want to make sure that we kind of adjust accordingly with our kind of approval and make sure that any screening or anything that is impactful on neighbors happens. So with that all said, I'm going to make a motion to deny the appeal for the portico. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. All right, so the appeal dies. We will move on to the same address. They are looking for new color, so this will be presented by the Collinses themselves. And then I believe we have affected parties that we'll hear from. So what we'll do from an order of operations is we'll hear the application first, and then we will hear from the multiple affected parties. I know there are some against it and there are some for it. So are the Collinses on?
Yes, the Collinses are here.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys again.
Yes, nice to be here. And thank
We
you.
are looking at a new color. So let's hear
Yes.
about it. This is
Okay.
the exciting part of the project.
Yes, so what happened was, as we were building the extension, and I want to just comment that, in fact, we did build the design that was submitted, but since this is about the color, I'll stay off that topic. We realized that our existing cedar siding is 35 years old. There's extensive damage, including insect holes, birds' nests, and water damage in the cedar siding throughout all of the exterior. And we realized that it was somewhat, you can see sort of in these photographs how the wood is sort of rippling there. That's not what we want. We found an enormous insect house right up behind where the air conditioner is. And so we decided that we wanted to, this is an example of the rot we know is in one part of the cedar siding, and we now suspect that it's in more than one part. And so we want to use the same James Hardy siding that we have approved for the extension. Okay, and you'll see here in this picture, this extension is level with our kitchen, okay, which was always the intent, to allow free access for wheelchairs and walkers. I apologize for my coughing, but I was in the hospital yesterday. So I want to say that changing the color, if you go back, we picked a color that we think, yes, this color here, the khaki brown, we think that actually better complements the brick and the variations in color in the brick than the dark brown of the cedar siding. And so we had 4 neighbors with direct line of sight have signed off on the DRB. 2 are registered as affected parties with very positive changes. And we respectfully request that the DRB allow us to proceed with re-siding the entire house in the James Hardy plank lap siding in khaki brown. And I'm not going to speak to the other issues that were raised. I believe that would be handled separately, if that's correct.
Correct.
That is correct. Okay, so we got the new color. Nothing is changing on the size, exposure of the boards. They're all going to match the existing.
Oh,
You're re-siding the whole house, correct?
Yeah, we're going to. Yeah, we had 2 bluebirds who built nests in the house, with our house last year, which is lovely, but
You
it's
just don't want
not-
them in your house. You build them a little birdhouse outside.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, understood. So here we have a couple affected parties. I have a list, so I'm going to go through them one by one that was given to me. So the first affected party I have is Wayne and Jennifer McGurk.
Yes, hi, this is Wayne McGurk. I'm speaking tonight for not only myself, but on behalf of my wife. We have direct line of sight to the to the north side of the Collins's house and to the front of the house. And we've personally looked at the side of the new Hardy siding along with the khaki brown color, and quite frankly, love the change in color. It's the best way to describe it is very pleasing. And we did, both my wife and I looked and saw the extensive damage that the Collins have on their 35-year-old sidings. So we're very happy with it. We are not in any way negative at all, but very positive with it. So, and I think it's a great addition to our private driveway, private pipe stem, and think it's a wonderful change, and support the Collins 100%. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Next, I have Nick and Leslie Ziermas.
I don't see them. I think that they may be.
I know. Yeah, I know they supported an email. They sent an email in support. If they're not on tonight, no big deal. I just have them here on my list. And then I have Leslie and Marcia Platt. So, Mr. Platt, just a reminder, 3 minutes on this appeal.
I'm trying to unmute him.
Affected party.
Yep, I'm trying to unmute him. Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
There we go. There we go.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah, there you go, Mr. Platt.
Okay, thank you. I don't think this will take 3 minutes. Again, thank you, Mr. Wood and the members of the DRB for your consideration of our concerns. The only issue we have with the change in color is very simple. We want to make sure we are not adversely impacted because it's a lighter color. So if there's screening and if the board takes into account the other comments we made to assure that there's not a last minute addition of additional heating or air conditioning equipment outside, and there's no other significant changes, at that point, we would be satisfied. The color and the material are desirable in many places. And so our concerns are about the impact on us of a lighter color, which can be screened with appropriate attention to that. And please don't ignore the fact that we talked about with the issues that we raised earlier. We do thank you very much, all of you, for your consideration, and we wish the Collinses all the best with this.
Great, thank you, sir. All right, so now we can go on to some questions. Can you guys re-unmute the Collins so we can ask them a couple questions?
Can I say something for the record?
Sure. You're the applicant.
If you will look at the pictures that Mr. Platt submitted, that he submitted, not that we submitted, you can see that it's very hard actually to see our house from his house, and that there is actually extensive screening. There's a whole grove of lovely holly trees in between his house and our house. So, and his picture demonstrates pretty clearly. I mean, I'm not going to go in his yard and take pictures of our house, but from our house looking to his house, it's hard to see as is. And with the leaves on the trees, you know, but there is a grove of absolutely gorgeous hollies in between the two houses.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on to the siding, I'll go around the room and see if anyone has any questions about it. Mike, did you have any questions about it?
Just a note of clarification. This is the same color, Hardy, that is already approved for the other edition?
No, it's not.
No. So they were originally just going to match the existing siding color that they have, which is kind of that darker brown.
Okay.
And so now this is a new, I don't know if it's a new material. I think we maybe approved Hardy before, but it just was going to be the same color as the existing, but now they're looking to change the color of the whole house.
Okay, but again, consistency, whole deal.
Yeah, they're going to do the whole house. Yep.
Cool. That was the only question. Thank you.
Jim, did you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Bruce, did you have any questions?
I do not.
So the only questions I had is, I feel, so you're keeping the trim color the same, correct?
Yes.
And so the only picture I have that I zoomed in on of where the trim and the siding come together, they're very close. Is that not correct?
I'm
In color, in color. So if you go to slide, Steph, could you go to slide? I'm looking at slide is this. Yeah, so scroll down on that page. Yeah, zoom in on that siding.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
is that your trim color there, correct?
That's our trim color.
Next to the khaki, correct?
Yeah, so it's not hugely different.
Correct. So that was my only concern, is that it's almost where it's gonna be, trim usually wants to be an accent color. So on your front facade where you have brick, it still is gonna look great. What I was worried about is that you almost are gonna lose, kind of that accent look of the trim itself, just because you kind of have this dark to light now. It's not a deal breaker for me one way or the other. I just wanted to point it out to make sure you guys, kind of understood what was going to happen there.
Yeah, and I honestly think that you're looking at some old trim, because in other pictures, the trim doesn't look quite as dark, but you are making a good point, namely that this is not a highly reflective, bright white color.
Yeah. So with all that said, I don't have a problem with the color. So I would be okay with it. Does anyone have a motion that they want to make?
I'd move to accept the application as submitted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Great. Motion passes.
I want to say thank you to all very much for hearing our application. We
Yep,
deeply
have a good
appreciate
night.
it. Thank you.
All right. Jumping over to Purple Sage Cluster. They're going to do some new lights.
I hate to. What? We're not muted.
Purple Sage Cluster. Don't worry, I'm muted. All right, there we go. Purple Sage Cluster. You guys are doing some new lights, which is exciting.
Yes.
So if you could, I believe there is one affected party on this. I don't know if they're speaking tonight or not, but you guys will present, and then we will ask the affected party to speak, and then we'll jump back over to you all to ask any questions you may have. So go ahead and present your application.
Okay, I guess we are seeking DRB approval to remove 22 existing poles and concrete bases to install 22 new 24-inch by 40-inch concrete anchor bases with new anchor bolts. We are seeking to install 22 RAB lighting number PS4-11-15D2, 15-foot by 4-inch square steel bronze poles, as well as install 25 new RAB. The item number 78-watt 3000 LED pole light fixtures, as well as replace a couple thousand feet of underground wiring.
Great. And we have the application, and I think we have everything from a color standpoint, 3000 Kelvin. So I think, so did I hear that correctly? You have 22 lights now, and you are, from what I see though on this, it says 25 lights. Hold on, I think she's muted.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, yes. So there are 25 lights in total. We have passed, in the past, 3 poles have been replaced. So we only have 22 poles to replace.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So then let me go over to the affected party, and then we'll come back and ask you any questions. I believe I have a Bob Sledzos and Jim Moran. Is that correct?
I have just phone numbers, so I'm going to need to know which phone number to unmute.
I think Bob is unmuted.
You can unmute
Okay.
the 1-703-929-5656. Unmute that one.
Okay,
Okay, can you hear us?
we can hear you.
Okay, you got Jim and Bob. We are deed holders, joint deed holders here. And we've been very involved in our cluster for 35. We moved in 35 years ago, and we've been active, attending all board meetings. First off, Colleen came in. She just moved into the neighborhood less than 3 years ago, and also Jared, which was her was on the board, working with PSE, the electricians, this is a more than $230,000 project. And she doesn't even have the total number of streetlights. There are 4 metal poles, meaning 4 of the 25 streetlights have already been replaced, not just 3. And the concern about that is they are already, the wiring, the UF wiring is already entombed in the base of those 4 lights, and they already have splices. There's actually 3 splices, three 3M splice kits on 1 pole at 1644. Because the PSE, the contractor, came out to, they spent $2,300 to have them make out all of the underground wiring, to tell them that the 35-year-old wiring was bad. And that was a waste of $2,300. We need to table this whole project. The community, they haven't discussed this at any board meeting. They discuss things behind the scenes in the dark. There's no transparency. They do not include the deed holder. As a matter of fact, we have a tree that's being cut down tomorrow that we've been trying to reach and work with Kat. Hank and Larry were out here and they saw the tree, the last tree. There's 3 oak trees on our property. They already took down 2. They're about ready to take down.
Without an approved application. But going back to the streetlights, our concern is our board now consists of 1 person. This 1 person is making a unilateral decision without any input or feedback from the neighborhood. We have not seen what the light patterns are. We don't know what the
also the color temperature. We never saw the style until this moment. The PSC were supposed to bring out the lights and put them up in the dark so we could see the pattern, the color temperature. And we're afraid that they don't look very well. We had box lights, shoebox lights, and these look more like something at Costco or in a parking lot at a hospital.
Yeah, it doesn't match we're a colonial, kind of old colonial style cluster. And from what these pictures are, these kind of look very, even though I'm all in favor of LED lightings, I agree that we do need lights here, but this is being rushed. We have not received 2 other bids, 2 other proposals. We just think this is being done in an improper manner, and we're just not pleased with what the design on the RB lights look. They don't seem to be appropriate for our neighborhood. And plus, we have no idea, as Jim mentioned, what the light pattern or the color temperature is, and there's been no consideration. One thing that's been ongoing since this neighborhood was built, the adjoining neighborhood of Country Walk, we share 2.
Then I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes is up.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys registering. I actually have some of the same concerns. I think you guys raised a couple questions that I do now have for the applicant. From what I see from a neighborhood notification, there was in the application, I only see there's 10 certified mail receipts, but there's obviously a lot more than 10 houses in this neighborhood. Staff, did we have any other proof of notification to the cluster in this application?
Yes, it was in their newsletter in April.
Okay. And then I have 1 question, but I'll save it till the end. I'll go around the room first. Mike B, did you have any questions for the applicant?
You actually just hit the notification question I had, and I believe the current board, it consists of 2 folks. not just a single person, for clarification's sake there.
Correct.
Okay. So it's just for what it's worth, figured for topic of discussion amongst the board here. No, I don't think I have anything else at this point, Michael. I may pop back in depending on where the conversation goes, but.
Jim, did you have any questions about the lights?
I don't have any questions, but it seems like the entire neighborhood, hopefully they've been informed and are aware of what's being submitted and reviewed.
They are. We've
Yeah.
actually had many meetings covering this.
And there were
Okay.
no issues raised about the change in the style or the temperature of the lighting.
No, not to my knowledge, no.
And to clarify the one question, in the application, it's 3,000 Kelvin, which we recommend either 2,700 or 3,000. So it is meeting that. So that is as part of the application. And there is even a photometric in here as well that kind of shows the light casting that is going to be done in slide 14. Jim, did you have any other questions?
No, you just answered my question with that drawing right there.
So that kind of gives an idea. I don't know if is the first one, Colleen, is the first one these are both what will be, right? They didn't do an existing photometric, I assume.
I'm from what I know is that they did an existing photometric, and everything that I've gotten is what I have presented to you.
Okay.
We're not changing the location of the lights necessarily. Is that correct? They're going back in the
They're
locations
in the
where.
exact same spot.
Gotcha. Okay. Bruce, did you have any questions?
It was really just if there are, I don't know, more architecturally consistent lighting fixtures that were considered. I mean, I think this is I don't know, stylistically more contemporary look than, but I'm not aware, and this is what the source of my question was, whether there are lights of similar functionality that were considered that might be more less contemporary looking.
Excuse me.
That's a question for the applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're asking if different heads had been considered?
Yep.
That is the head that was recommended to us from our PSC contractor based on what is existing here in the community. So he took the
That's the
lights
picture
that
staff.
he felt best matched and would duplicate the same light pattern as these lights here.
And the shoebox is the current, that's correct.
Yeah, and I think flipping between that and page 22 seems to indicate what we're going with this time around.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. There's a round bit to the top, but the general.
It's pretty close. I hear.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so my biggest issue with the application, before I heard anything I heard tonight, was the concrete bases. So normally in neighborhoods, we don't like those concrete bases. Those are more meant for commercial properties. Normally we want to have this post buried in the ground. I personally don't like those concrete bases at all, even in commercial settings. Normally they say they're needed because of the higher wattage that's running to the lights to supply them, because they need to do a junction box, et cetera, et cetera. So have you guys, I know we review lots of lights like this from other neighborhoods. They don't ever need the concrete bases. Is there, I think what I would prefer is that we try to find a way to remove that. And that they do all the junction box inside of the pole, not have a surface mounted kind of junction box, which is what it looks like on page, I don't know where that went. But there was kind of a surface mounted junction box on the pole versus it being wired within the pole. I don't know if that was, are you guys, because it looks like existing lights, or at least the cluster standard was originally 6x6 posts. Obviously those get beat up over time. I'm actually shocked that they even had those to begin with. And then it looks like maybe they were replaced at one point with these other posts, aluminum posts.
Yes, so it's from what I understand is that they had fallen down, or they were in very poor shape, and so they were taken down and replaced with those metal posts. The wood ones were taken down and replaced with those.
Okay. And currently do you guys currently already have those concrete bases?
We do, and that's why the concrete bases were added into this, because it's already in the design in the neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I just, since they're already suggesting to replace all that, to me, I would just remove the bases completely. In my opinion, they don't, to me, it doesn't fit in to a residential style neighborhood. And I know it's possible because I know there's tons of light poles that don't have those in residential settings. Does anybody have a feeling one way or the other? I don't necessarily have a problem with the light. I mean, it's not the most attractive light, but it's similar to the shoebox. And these are the exact same height as the existing. All the existing ones are 15 feet tall as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I generally don't have a problem, Michael. Yeah, we're replacing as close to like for like as we can. So I don't really.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely look more industrial looking. I'm trying to think of a cluster that I could point them to that's done lights recently. What was that one that's on Lake Thoreau, I think, or Lake Audubon? They did lights recently, and they had more colonial style.
It was Harbor Point condos.
Harbor Point, yeah. Thank you, Jane. Do we? What I'm thinking is that we could maybe find a way to amend, maybe defer the application to allow them to investigate removing the concrete bases and potentially introduce a different, more traditional style light fixture that kind of is more appropriate with the neighborhood. Does anyone else have any other thoughts before someone makes a motion?
In terms of the concrete bases, I find it interesting that the existing ones are supported by way of what appears to just be cylindrical, the sonotube type foundation elements, and then anchor bolt patterns therein. So I guess, we're keeping consistent with that, presumably, or your point being,
yeah,
they could be buried at least.
Two wrongs don't make a right, in my
No,
opinion.
I'm with you. I just meant, could we have them cut off at ground surface so that the concrete element for the foundation support, if they're saying they're necessary for whatever, they can at least, be flush with the ground surface so they're not an eyesore. That was my point.
Yeah, I think it's possible. But I've seen so many new lights go in that you don't need, it doesn't need to be set in concrete. Very rarely do they set them in concrete.
In these residential applications.
Yeah, when if it's not part of a parking lot where it's going to get hit or need protection from certain things, it's a little bit overkill. And I think that's kind of where I'm kind of bringing it up and leading from. That would just be my kind of thing. So if anyone wants to make a motion, or I kind of have a motion in mind that I'd like to make.
Have at it.
Michael, could I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I agree with your observation about the base. I would be a little concerned about the added cost. Is that an expensive would be suggesting that they add significantly more expense to the project because to remove the bases? Or to
I think it'd actually be cheaper because they're already removing them. I think as part of the application is that they're replacing all those bases.
Replacing 22 of them, so not all of them.
So they're already pulling out 22 of them.
But so then you have to pull out the other ones?
Well, I don't see what we have record of when you guys replaced the other 3 lights.
I don't know.
I don't know if it was ever applied for. So if it was put in without approval, then yeah, theoretically they would need to pull them out. I guess the thing is that they have to pull them out because the wiring that's inside is probably tucked up inside of that concrete base, and therefore it's having to be replaced, correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not an electrician.
Okay.
The reason for my question is if we were deferring, what I'm understanding is if they're already talking about removing the base. So the question is the fixture.
Yeah, I mean, we could even just defer it just for the fixture. I personally, I don't want to approve it if the base is there. That would be my kind of feeling. You guys may or may not, agree with that. But I do agree that the fixture could be. I've seen other clusters pick more appropriate fixtures, and from what it sounds like, there really wasn't much of a design consideration kind of suggested. It was just a suggested fixture from the contractor, and he just kind of went off what was there. But I think Dominion has a couple, even if I know these aren't Dominion owned power poles, but I know they have a kind of a much more equivalent to the shoebox fixture that they've installed around Reston when it has come up that they own the pole versus the cluster. So I don't know if staff can help them out, maybe guide them towards that selection, kind of something that we're more looking towards. But I'll hear any type of motion if anyone wants to make one. If not, I can do one.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you like us to stay with the shoebox fixture?
I don't think they make shoebox fixtures anymore. If you're going to these LED panels, which I'm in full support of LED. They take a lot less energy. As long as they're the 3000 Kelvin or less, I don't have an issue with them. I think the biggest issue with this one is probably all those little ribs that are kind of on the back side of the light that just make it look, I don't know, it's rounded. It just kind of makes it look a little too parking lot-y. And that's, I think, the big issue. So what I'll do is I'll make a motion to defer the application to allow the applicant to investigate with their contractor additional light fixture selections, and to investigate removing of the concrete base, or at least getting it to below ground level, so we don't have to look at it, and that all junction wiring be within the pole itself, not on the outside.
Michael, that was deferring for further study?
Yeah, that was basically deferred for further study, and then having suggested things that they should have.
Just wanted to be clear. My feed cut out
Yep.
for a hot second. Just want to make sure.
Yep.
I'll second that, Michael.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
No?
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, the motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
You as well.
All right, moving on to 2030 Beacon Hill, or just Beacon Place, sorry, it's in Beacon Hill cluster. We have an applicant. I don't believe there's any affected parties on this one. And yeah, they're doing an exciting infinity pool project.
Yes, hi, I'm Cynthia.
Hi,
And I
Cynthia.
have, I think Doug Nichols is on the line. He's my endless pool expert. Doug, are
Okay.
you there? Okay. He was going to try to join us, but he lives at near Frederick, Maryland.
He could be muted. Do you happen to know his phone number?
It's a 301 number.
358, let me see.
301. Yeah.
I see a 301 number, but I don't know if that's him. What was his name?
I'm trying to unmute him now.
301-639-7358.
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect.
Doug, if you're on your phone and you press *69, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can't do it from here. There you go.
There we
There
go.
we go. Doug,
He's
can I hear
live.
you?
Okay. Thank you.
There we are. Awesome. Apparently
Thank
you're
you,
the
Doug,
pool-
for
you're the pool
joining.
expert.
So first of all, I want to apologize because when I ordered this pool 9 months ago, I was in a bit of a COVID anxiety crisis, and I didn't realize that there was a Reston Association, I guess, policy against pools and clusters. And I just didn't have that sensitivity, so I apologize. Right now, I do have a $50,000 pool sitting in crates in my driveway, and I apologize for that too.
I don't
Having
live in
said-
your neighborhood.
Having said all that, it has enabled me to get a lot of support from the neighborhood. For those of you that are not familiar, Beacon Hill is a very large, diverse group of single-family homes. And as homes on Beacon Place go, mine is one of the largest with one of the largest yards. It was the model home. And the endless pool is a tiny pool. It's 10 foot by 16 foot. It's really a therapy pool. It has one single, very quiet current. And where I'm putting this pool, there used to be a very large covered gazebo with a jacuzzi. And it took up a huge part of the yard because it was surrounded by a 3 foot wide raised planter. So it was a 17 by 17 foot area. The pavers that you see were there from 1989. Most of them were there. They're still there. So what I've tried to do is stay within the spirit of the current backyard design. I only have one neighbor really to the right, 2028, and they're fully supportive. On the left, I have 80 feet or so of common wooded property. No one goes there because it's raised. And then there's a street. And then there's a neighbor, 2032, they've approved, they can barely see my house. And then if you look in this picture, you can see there are townhomes below. So there's common property behind me, then there's a guest parking, then there's a street, and all 4 townhomes that are anywhere near my house, they've all approved also. And the Beacon Hill Cluster Board of 5 has said that they also approve and support the project. So, so I think, I think I've done everything I can do to try to stay within the spirit of what Reston Association is trying to accomplish, but I recognize this is a request for an exception to policy. I should also just mention that there's a home just like mine in the neighborhood that's put an addition on the front and the back. And I'm not asking to do anything like that. I just want to put a little hole in the ground and quietly go swimming. Jacuzzis are really loud. There's a lot of jets. People are drinking and talking, and this is not that kind of project. But Doug Nichols is on. He can answer any technical questions. There's going to be a small pool heater on the side of the house opposite the neighbor next to my air conditioning unit. And so no one will hear it. No one will see it. Other than that, I think, I don't know what more I can do. Other than tell you, if you need a reason for an exception, I could give you a medical reason. I'm very fragile. I'm 60 years old and I'm really fast. And that's actually a problem. If I was a slow swimmer, I could just go swim on the Reston Master Swim team with 7 really strong guys in my lane. But I'm afraid I'll get a broken arm. And I even have trouble at lap swim sometimes. If I was a slow swimmer, life would be a lot easier. But I'm not.
Well, no worries. I think you have a full application. I'm not too, I think like the cluster thing is more of a, most clusters are townhouses. There's, we have 150 some odd clusters, probably 90% of them are townhouses. So that's where I'm sure that kind of precedent kind of comes in from the past. You're not really, you're putting in a pool, but it's not really a pool. It's not really an in-ground pool to that extent. It's more of, still on the jacuzzi, hot tub kind of side of things. The only question that I had was there going to be any additional exterior lighting a part of the project to light this up? Like you're not going to light this up so you can swim at 10 o'clock at night. From what I can see, I don't see any lights, but I just wanted to double check.
There are actually 4 lights inside the pool, 2 on each of the 2 sides.
And these lights are under, and if I can butt in, these lights are underwater, typically 14 inches below the water line, and they will illuminate the pool.
Okay, so they're not spilling over light, out of
No,
it
not at all.
becoming this beacon in the ground. Okay. That was the only question I had. I'll ask Mike B. Did you have any questions?
None. I'm good. Thank you.
Jim, did you have any questions?
Yeah, what is the depth of the pool?
It's 48 inches deep.
And it looks like from the rendering that it's partially raised.
So we currently have a raised deck, and the deck is about 2 feet high, and the pool will be flat with that deck. We're going to obviously get a new wood surround, but the pool is 24 inches under ground level and 24 inches above ground level. But because it has the raised deck, it will be flush with the deck.
Okay, and this is more of like a swim spa kind of situation.
It's a pool,
Yes.
but it has a single current that goes from one end to the other end.
Right, it's like a swim spa.
Yes, a very
Yes, it's
expensive swim spa.
Basically a single person swimming pool that you can relax in it as well, but has a generated current that you swim against.
Okay.
And
You've
I mean,
question?
just to
Okay.
if you're interested, a very, very good swimmer, much better than me, could not outswim this pool.
Okay. Bruce, did you have any questions?
No, I like the project.
Yeah, I think it's a thorough application. I think it's screened nicely. They already have kind of a tall fence on that side already with some nice lattice. They're then introducing some additional screening. The equipment is tucked away nicely. I think it's a very thorough application. The only thing I did just notice, and it was something that I wrote down in my notes, was that the decking board that you're proposing, the color of it is not in the cluster guidelines. Do you know if this color that you picked happens to match closely to one of the stain colors that is approved?
So it's a hardwood that's just going to have a natural stain. But if we decide, right, that it needs a stain, we're going to use one of the approved stains.
Right. So the Ipe is, I mean, normally it's, water resistant. It's, it's durable. I think they normally just put a clear sealant on it. So I guess technically you are still meeting the intent then, because you're just using you're basically letting the wood weather. You just happen to use a different type of wood in this instance. Okay. All right. Well, I don't have a problem with it. I'm a little jealous, to be honest, that you can put this on your property. But anybody want to make a motion?
I'd move to accept the application, to approve the application as submitted.
Great. I'll actually
second, Bruce.
Nope. Mike seconded it before I could. Mike seconded it. Any further discussion?
Michael,
Okay,
can I make one small comment?
Yep.
Just for clarification, this is something that staff believes should be examined with the working group, because we do have those single family homes that are in clusters that may want a pool but can't have one, or the guideline doesn't address pools with single families in cluster associations.
Yeah, I guess what I liked is Jim's wording of it. It's a swim spa, and that it's not to the extent of a pool. To me, it is a swim spa. It's a pre-manufactured, made in a facility, obviously sitting in her driveway type of thing, just like the way a hot tub would be, delivered. So I think we're still kind of against, someone trying to put a pool in on such a small lot. I think they would actually run into some problems anyway with the county from a lot coverage standpoint. In this instance, I don't think, to me, I would clarify in the approval that this is a swim spa and not a pool. That's how I would be looking at it, and that's how I reviewed it. So, but it is definitely something we can look at during the working group. So,
I would modify my motion to clarify that we're approving this application for a swim spa as submitted.
I'll accept the amendment.
And Mike B accepts. Great. Any further discussion on that? I don't think so. So all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion passes.
I'm also jealous, for the record.
Enjoy your
Well,
spot.
I just want to thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck. Hopefully
Good
now
luck.
you can move forward full
Thank
steam
you.
ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, have a good night. All right, moving on to the last application of the night. We have the Vantage Hill redevelopment project for their pool. It is being reheard. I believe it was appealed, and the appeal was upheld a couple months ago when I was not here, actually. But I think it's back before us. We have a long list of affected parties, so we'll do the same process. We will hear the application. I think we're all familiar with the project. I think actually Jim was not on the board maybe when the original project was submitted. So he'll be able to see it for the first time and kind of comment, and then we will go to the affected parties and go over everybody. And then we'll go back and ask any questions and take a vote on it. So are the members from Vantage Hill here? Rob, are you here?
Yes.
Both Robs,
Yes.
actually both Robs. Lynn,
Yes.
welcome back. Hello.
Thank
I
you.
think Aaron with the site, their civil is on as well, probably to answer any questions we may have. So take it away.
Thank you so much. Again, this is Lynn Strobel with the law firm of Walsh Galucci, and I'm here this evening as a representative of Vantage Hill Condominium and Craftmark Homes. We also have, as you mentioned, Robert Schumann from Vantage Hill Condominium, Robert Malm from Craftmark, and Aaron Vinson with Walter L. Phillips, who is our civil engineer. So I'm just going to provide a few introductory remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schumann, and then we will provide a brief presentation just to refresh your memory of this application and hopefully to answer your questions. So I would just start by saying that while this is a new hearing, it is a continuation of a dialogue that began many months ago, as was mentioned. It's a proposal that is jointly submitted. It's jointly submitted by Vantage Hill Condominium and Craftmark Homes. The proposal is to allow Vantage Hill to remove a swimming pool and associated buildings that have not been used or maintained for years due to the cost of bringing them back into service. What has become an eyesore is proposed to be replaced with single-family attached homes. The proposed development will enhance neighboring properties and strengthen the overall community. I just want to clarify too, before I turn it over to Mr. Schumann, that this request is before the DRB to approve the proposal in concept to include site layout and density. So I just want to be very clear that this proposal will return to you to address architecture, colors, building materials, and lighting. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Schumann, and then I think that Mr. Malm will provide a brief presentation. And if possible, I wondered if our lines could remain open because there are certain areas that one of us may want to comment on as we're going through the process. So thank you very much. Mr. Schumann?
Oops, there we go. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I'm just going to briefly go through the background because I know there's been a couple of new board members since the first time we went through this. And this Vantage Hill project was started within the Vantage Hill community about 7 years ago. And it's been a long process. So Craftmark is actually the third builder with whom we have engaged on this project. And we're very happy to have them as a partner. And just some background, Vantage Hill was built in 1967, consists of 24 buildings and has 152 units. Vantage Hill is approximately 65% owner occupied. The good news is Vantage Hill, if you open up the dictionary and looked up market rate workforce housing, I think a picture of Vantage Hill would come up. Okay, it's a beautiful complex. But the units are pretty much among the cheapest in in probably much of Northern Virginia. Our people who live there it's a very diverse community. The units themselves are very nice. Vantage Hill will win no architecture awards from the outside, I'm pretty sure. Maybe it would have in the day, I don't know, but not now. But the spacious, and we have many long-term residents. That's the good news. The bad news is we're a workforce housing community, and our residents do not typically have a lot of spare cash. And we have 60-year-old infrastructure. It's expensive to maintain, it's expensive to operate, and it desperately needs to be rebuilt. We literally fix water leaks on a weekly basis throughout our community. We have a failed pool, which has now been dead for over 7 years. We were unable to maintain it and keep it operating. We have high HOA fees because of the condition we're in, and our condominium, our condominiums and our development is slowly shifting towards rental units. The community does, we have the resources to fix our roofs and to do the painting and to keep it up 90%, but we have never had the resources to really rebuild our infrastructure. And as a result, the community is not on a great trajectory. So about 7 years ago, the board and members of the community were puzzling how to solve this issue and looking at the overall community. And we realized that the failed pool and the area around it was essentially an unused asset. And so we came upon the approach of finding a development partner who would work with us to use that area to do some site relevant and infill that would fit in the community that we all live in. Okay, this is an infill that's being proposed by the people who live there, and we'll look at it every day. Okay, it's a relatively small development. We believe that Craftmark has done a tremendous job in making it fit in with the spirit of Reston, as well as the area.
I believe Rob got muted somehow.
Oops. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now.
There we go. Great. There's a lot of focus on green space and tree cover preservation, and there's been extensive community involvement within Vantage Hill. The proceeds that we would get from this, we will use to put in individually metered electrical service to each unit. That today cannot be done, but you couldn't even build units these days without that, because it's much better for the environment because people use a lot less resources. We'll replace our 50, almost 60-year-old now single pane windows and doors. We may rebuild our building entrances, heating and AC updates, plumbing rebuilds, stormwater upgrades. There's all kinds of potentials. Electric vehicle charging stations are things that people really would like to see now. But this cash that comes from this project will enable our community to basically rebuild the guts of our buildings so that this can be a great community within Reston for the next 60 years. So from our perspective, we believe this is a win-win for both Vantage Hill, for Reston itself, because it'll get new residents to help support Lake Anne, which we all know does not have enough density to really make it work. And we believe Craftmark is an excellent partner, both for us as well as for Reston itself, in building units that will fit in and look like they belong in the neighborhood in which they're being built. So, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Lynn. This is Robert Malm with Craftmark. I think it would be probably best to kind of run through some of our slides from our previous submissions. I do know we have a few new board members, but I think it might be helpful for everybody just to kind of see where we came from with the design and where we landed, so we can have a better conversation about it. This was a submission from November. We could probably go to the next one, which is slide. Yes, this slide. So this is where the design sits today. I guess what I'd like to start with is kind of run through and explain some of the modifications which have been made already in response to previous DRB comments. So you can kind of understand some of the adjustments have taken place. In no particular order, we did remove one of the entrances along Vantage Hill Road. So now we have one entrance instead of two. And this actually opened the doors to some other improvements as well, which I'll get to. We revised the building footprints to provide a variety of offsets and jogs to enhance and articulate the front elevations. We increased the setbacks along Wainwright Drive, creating what's going to be a 45-foot landscape buffer. We added brick paver driveways to enhance their appearance. We increased the preservation of the existing landscaping and increased the proposed landscaping as well. We revised the site grading. Eliminating that entrance was one of the things that helped us do this. We lowered the site considerably to more closely match the existing topo and reduce the overall massing and appearance of the buildings. I have another slide that we'll come up to, which further exemplifies this. We reduced the limits of disturbance, which means we pulled in the area on which we'll be disturbing. This we thought was important, especially to the southeast quadrant where we are saving a lot of mature trees. That was a goal since day one. Vantage Hill was, was always looking to make sure we did that. And this, reduction in LOD helps us achieve that. We added a communal gathering area, which overlooks the open community tree preservation area, which I just mentioned, which is in of itself a natural amenity. We revised the driveway width and design to accommodate planting medians between the driveway, so we could soften the alley and add vegetation back there. We shifted buildings 26 through 29, which is the building in the top right. And this helped break up the massing and increase sight lines between the buildings. We eliminated all the retaining walls. There were originally some retaining walls on the south side of the site, but lowering the grade helped us eliminate those retaining walls. We concentrated the proposed development over top of the existing development area, where the pool deck, the pool house, and the parking lot all exist today in kind of that L formation. And we improved the site drainage and the stormwater management performance to something that's going to be better than what's there today, which is basically nothing. Aaron with Walter Phillips will be able to explain some of the benefits on that a little later. And of course, we did reduce the number of dwelling units. Our original proposal did have 31, and this proposal is down to 29. So again, this is the colored rendering of where the site stands today. We can flip to the next slide. If you guys recall, in the January meeting, we were asked to, the next slide, please. I think it's 62. There we go. We were asked to provide some site perspectives. So we did provide a handful of camera angles and tried to render the site from around the perimeter to display what the site might look like. So these are those 4 camera angles. I believe we actually had a 5th one on the alley side too. And again, Lynn touched on this, but remember, we'll be coming back to you all for architecture, colors, and materials. So this is really our first crack at, one of the options. But to be completely honest, there's some adjustments that we would be making internally anyway. I'm sure we'll hear some comments from the board, but we do intend to come back for architecture, colors, and materials, et cetera. But this does kind of give you a feeling of what the site might look like. And we did 2 versions of some of these pictures to show tree growth, something closer to, when it's planted, and something closer to, 10, 15 years down the road. So this first camera angle is from Wainwright Drive looking north. You can see the buildings, they sit about 45 feet back from the curb. They do start to slope down. You can see there's 2 sidewalks here. That second sidewalk closer to the units kind of disappears because the grade's dropping. And then you have the Wainwright Drive sidewalk. And that area will be planted as shown in the landscape plan, which is coming up. We can scroll through some of these renderings so everybody can kind of see the site perspectives from around the perimeter. This one's closer, camera 2 is taken from closer to the intersection of Vantage Hill and Wainwright Drive. You can see the alley is kind of sunken down and disappears. So that's something else we wanted to pay attention to, is to minimize the impact of the alley, at least as it's seen from the perimeter. So just following the natural contours of the site, dropping the alley down makes that happen, and also the proposed landscaping makes that happen. So there's 2 pictures from along Vantage Hill Road with 2 different, tree ages at planting and something little, 10, 15 years down the road. And the last one, the second to last one, is some alley pictures. So we added some landscape medians between the driveways. This also helps shield the HVAC units. We added brick pavers to the driveways to improve their aesthetic. And finally, this was one of the last renderings we did to show up the alley from the south side, to kind of give you all an example of what that may look like. The next handful of slides are some of the grading, stormwater management, landscaping plan slides, which we presented to you all. I'll let Aaron walk you through those.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Aaron Vinson with Walter Phillips. I'll start with landscaping. What you're looking at here is our preliminary landscape plan, and it shows a combination of sort of two approaches to landscaping. The first approach is that we're going to maximize tree preservation within our site. We are within our site area, which is roughly defined by Wainwright Drive to the plan west, Vantage Hill Drive to the north, the existing Vantage Hill residential building to the east, and the RA trail to the south. Our design has been sort of compacted, so to speak, to maximize tree preservation, and it results in 50% of the existing tree canopy within our site area remaining. It's probably also worth noting that when you look at Vantage Hill as a whole, the preservation proposed here will result in excess of 90% of the tree canopy throughout Vantage Hill being preserved. If you could go to the next slide. And I would also add, actually, I'm sorry, if you could go back, sorry. One of the things I did want to point out, proposed landscaping is the second piece of what we're doing. We have focused our landscaping design in a way that responds to what we heard from this group throughout the process, with a significant focus being along Wainwright Drive. And so, as Robbie mentioned a few slides earlier, we're really attempting through grading, architectural design, and landscaping to minimize the sort of visual impact along Wainwright of this development. And so, as you can see, we're proposing 3 rows of trees, and that'll be a combination of street trees up along Wainwright, a new sidewalk, and then a double row of combination of deciduous and ornamental trees between the street trees and the proposed buildings. We're also mimicking that where we can along Vantage Hill to provide a sort of uniform street tree approach as you enter Vantage Hill and Mediterranean. And then we are clustering a significant amount of evergreens and shrubs near the corner of Wainwright and Vantage Hill to sort of emphasize how much we are attempting to screen the alley. So the grading that we've done, where we've sort of pushed the alley down into the ground about 4 to 6 feet lower than Vantage Hill and Wainwright, is pretty effective. And then we're adding on top of that some additional landscaping that we think will really help to hide the alley. We're pretty pleased with sort of the view that we would expect to see at that corner. Next slide. Thank you. So this is some preliminary utility and grading plan. What I'll touch on here will sort of lead into the next slide, which is the site today has no stormwater management controls whatsoever. Water drains through our site from Wainwright, from Vantage Hill, through a series of existing swales and gravel channels. And what we're proposing to do is to capture all of that runoff and treat a significant amount of it. And so a site that is uncontrolled from a stormwater standpoint will see pretty significant improvements with this development. And if you can go to the next slide, I can touch on some of those. So this slide contrasts the existing impervious area today with what we expect to see with this development. I'll spare you the boring details, but generally speaking, we are increasing impervious area by roughly 12% over the existing condition, which is something that we're pretty pleased with. We've made pretty significant efforts to concentrate our development within the footprint of the existing parking lot and within the area of the pool deck today. And so with that minimal increase in impervious area combined with some of the stormwater controls we're adding, just some rough numbers on stormwater management, we have analyzed in coordination with this group and with Karen in particular, who we heard from throughout the original approval process. We analyzed 3 storm events: the 1-year storm, which is the most common storm event that we see, the 2-year storm, and the 10-year storm. And so these are storm events with a probability of happening once a year, twice a year, or excuse me, once a year, once every 2 years, and once every 10 years. We also know that these larger storms seem to be happening more frequently today. So some rough numbers here. We expect to reduce the 1-year storm with the detention and treatment measures we're introducing by 75% relative to pre-development. So pretty significant development reduction. And because of that, we're pretty comfortable that the runoff we're discharging into the existing channel, which flows toward Lake Ann, will not be impacted by what we're doing. And then for the 2 and the 10-year storm, what we're proposing, we expect to facilitate at least a minimum of a 10% reduction in peak runoff rates relative to the existing conditions today. So we're pretty excited about our design and what it's going to do for stormwater. It really is going to improve a situation that has no controls today. So we think that's a move in the right direction. And Robbie, I didn't know if you wanted to touch on this or if you wanted me to.
I can touch on this. This is the parking plan. Since the proposed development is taking up, where a large parking lot currently resides, we are relocating those parking spaces, so there is no loss in parking spaces. We're replacing all the parking spaces 1 for 1, and we're able to accomplish this by finding unused locations throughout the remainder of Vantage Hill, as shown in this drawing, where we can install new parking spaces. And these parking spaces will be installed prior to development, so there's not a period of time where the community is at a loss of these parking spaces. These slides I thought were also useful to touch on because they illustrate some of the changes which I've already mentioned, particularly the dropping of the site. When we eliminated that entrance on Vantage Hill Road, that allowed us to regrade the alley, starting at its connection on the right and pushing it down into the earth. So those red numbers in the middle of the alley represent the amount of drop we are able to achieve, starting at 1 foot down to 5.9 feet on the south side. So that south side dropped almost 6 feet, and the buildings went with it. Other things this calls out is the reduction of the LOD. So the LOD is signified by that heavy dashed line around the perimeter of the site. In the previous iteration, in the lower right-hand corner, that dashed line pushed further right into that tree save area. So that's the area where it says, the words say, reduced limits of disturbance, increased undisturbed open space. That's the area we're trying to preserve with the mature trees to create a natural amenity. So what that will feel like is you're going to have a gently sloping hill. That detention is buried, so you won't see it. But you have a gently sloping hill starting at the detention, sloping down to what is natural undisturbed open space below it. The retaining walls eliminated were along that south side, next to the trail. Dropping the grade allowed us to do that. And just as a reminder, that existing asphalt trail will remain open. We're able to leave it open during construction. And that's it for this slide. There's, I believe, yes, a couple more slides. This is a site section going east-west across the site. And you can see the red lines represent where we were. The black lines represent what we were able to drop. And the other thing this section shows is the scale of the buildings, and in comparison to the other 2 buildings in this section, which is the building on the far left. You can see it's certainly in scale with that. Actually sits at a lower elevation, but even if it weren't, it would be about the same height. And the existing buildings on the far right, it is in a similar scale to that as well. This is the second section, a north-south cut through the site. Again, showing the same thing. The red lines were where we were able to drop. This is on the higher side of the site anyway, so the drop was a little less substantial, but there still was a drop. And I believe we had 2 other slides that were actually from an earlier work session. Yes, that's it. I think we called it the neighborhood context exhibit. This was a slide we presented. It might have been in October where we had a work session, if memory serves me right. But I wanted to bring this back up because what this did is, this was when we made the change to shift the buildings back from Wainwright Drive. The original submission had the buildings a little closer. We were able to shift them back so the fronts of the faces are about 45 feet from curb. And we wanted to see where that stacked up to the other buildings in the surroundings. So we surveyed that. As you can see, some of the buildings have building corners at 27, 32, 16, 55, 47, 44. So we thought 45 did fit within the setbacks as established around Wainwright, which is the primary loop road through these clusters, as everybody knows. And this was an exhibit brought up at that same work session, I believe, which overlaid what's there today in pink and what we propose in green. The existing developed area, parking lot, pool deck, pool, is kind of in that L formation that runs along Vantage Hill and down to Wainwright. And so that's where we wanted to concentrate our development. In fact, we wanted to pull it further away from that southeast corner, which this is also showing, to create a larger open space area in that southwest corner, because that was going to be the primary site amenity, the natural open space, the mature trees we were trying to save. And that's also where we ended up putting the communal gathering area, which overlooks that area. I believe that's the end of the slides that I wanted to touch on and bring everybody back up to speed. Couple things that we did take into account when doing this design, and I think help our proposal adhere to the guidelines is this site does have a lot of topography going across it. It's a big drop, and so the way we're able to design these buildings, we're using the buildings as a way to absorb grade. They're buried in the fronts and they walk out in the backs, at least along the two roads, Vantage Hill and Wainwright. So in this way, in dropping the alley, the site does respect the nature of topography. It accommodates drainage requirements and improves the stormwater management performance of the site, as Aaron touched on. It minimizes the grading and preserves natural vegetation where it was possible, primarily in the bottom right-hand corner of the site. It does preserve the existing trees and the open space in that quadrant as well. It considers the impact on the adjacent properties as the massing is in sync. It provides variation along the street frontages via setbacks, jogs, offsets in the building fronts. And it provides an activity area in the form of this natural open space and a gathering area that we think will be a benefit to the community. So that's the end of, I guess, my part of the presentation. I wanted to walk everybody through, get everybody up to speed, especially the two new members, because this process, we have gone through a couple iterations of design. We've heard a lot of comments and we've been able to respond to the large majority of them. And I think we landed someplace that does adhere to the guidelines and does fit into the fabric of the existing neighborhood.
Great, thank you. I have questions, but unfortunately I have to go through all the affected parties. So we will go through those first, and then I will come back with our questions. All right, so I have a list here. I have 7 on the list. Just a reminder, 3 minutes per affected party. Staff is tracking that. So if they mute you, get mad at them, not me. It's not me doing it. So the first one on the list I have is Damian D'Antonio.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Damian.
Thanks, Michael. So I think I've attended every one of these. So I'll be quick so I can make good use of my 3 minutes. I live at 1707 Wainwright Drive. I've been living in Wainwright Cluster for the past 12 years. My wife and I ended up here because we really like the community and the design aesthetics of Reston, especially kind of the historic Lake Ann area. We love the neighborhood, the trails, the proximity to nature. It's a perfect environment for raising our 3 kids. I've also been on the Wainwright Cluster board for the past 11 years and recently become the Wainwright Cluster president. So I understand kind of the difficult challenge that Vantage Hill is faced with the financial management, but I still have several concerns with the current proposal for the redevelopment. And it's all tied back to the RA redevelopment guidelines. The first part being that it's, the property has to be in, contextual balance with the neighboring properties. And for the purposes of how I view it, at least the neighboring properties would be those other properties on Wainwright Drive. All of those properties offer significant outdoor space, either via the inward facing centered around a community green space, or the case of Mediterranean, each house having its own large private courtyard. The current proposal, while there is this, little community space, really lacks any, usable community space. They just have tiny decks overlooking an alley, and it really doesn't create the sense of community that most of the other clusters along Wainwright Drive all have. And the alleyway, kind of forces, takes up what could be green space. It forces things closer to the street, and it also just creates a potential eyesore in the future. If you go drive by the Tall Oaks redevelopment on the corner of North Shore and Wheelie, it probably started out as a decent concept. And when you start to see people actually living in it and trash cans lining it, cars parked all over the place, it really just, it kind of falls apart. And then the other part is the detrimental effect. So, the redevelopment should not detrimentally impact neighboring properties, especially residential neighborhoods. I think there's a great chance that there's going to be a detrimental impact, not only, for a couple reasons, the cars, there's tiny driveways and alleys, which you can't park a car in, with garages, which will likely end up being used for storage rather than parking cars. So there's going to be tons of additional traffic out and parking out onto Wainwright Drive. There's also, even after it's been brought up several times, there's the lack of, even kind of analysis or looking at RELAC. I think there's a need by the DRB and RA to examine, if not using RELAC is even an option based off of the rest indeed. But, in addition to the requirements, there's the neighboring, the sound to the neighboring communities from all of these, what will be 30 air conditioning units. And then lastly, it's just the density. And while I know the density per Fairfax County allows it, the density of this proposal is significantly denser than many of the other communities on Wainwright Drive. 29 units on, I think it's under 2 acres, compared to our cluster, Wainwright cluster, which has 42 units on just under 7 acres. So it's well over double the density of the neighboring communities. And so I guess kind of to wrap things up, I understand they have a dire financial situation at Vantage Hill. And I think
The
there's
3
other
minutes
ways.
are up. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. All right, moving on to Burton Griffith.
I don't see Burton here.
Okay. We will circle back if he
We'll ask.
joins on.
And
Make sure,
then
Burton,
go-
if you are on, raise your hand or hit something on your phone. I don't know what it is to notify that you're here. If not, I'll move on to the next one. You think I'm good to move on, Jane?
Yeah, and I have unmuted Graham,
Yeah.
our brother.
Okay, great. Graham, Far Brother. Hey, Graham.
Yep. Hi, thank you. I'll move quickly. I would just echo everything that Damien said. I think for those who've been through this before, that he represented everything that I've been saying, and most recently in my appeal to the last decision. So in addition to that, I would just appeal to the board just to consider a couple things as you're making your decisions. I think the demonstrations of the current design versus the earlier design, while somewhat interesting, are not particularly relevant. And I would encourage you not to make a decision based on the fact that they have improved it relative to the original thing, which was not appropriate in the first place. So just because it's better does not make it good enough for this area. We also, the site plan comparison about the development relative to what will be versus what there is now, that's not particularly reflective. That's just a site plan. That's a 2-dimensional plan. That's not going to really reflect the impact that is going on when you have all these 3-dimensional structures now popping up across the site. It's not just about the footprint. I hope that the board members have been able to come out and drive through or walk through around Wainwright Drive, because I think what the fundamental problem is here is you drive through, you don't see into these neighborhoods until you get to the neighborhoods. A lot of the affected parties are going to show you pictures of sort of worst case scenario in other instances, but those are all exceptions to the rule that this Wainwright Road is ringed with well-developed, large landscape buffered areas, landscape edges with clusters sort of hidden behind that. And this will decidedly not be that. This is even with the few rows of trees that they're proposing along Wainwright Drive, and not to mention what's happening on Vantage Hill where there's almost no buffer. Just completely out of character with everything that's going on there. If I haven't made that case before and you don't agree with me, I just don't know what to do at this point. And I would say, I just want to caution, if I'm still have a few minutes time, one of the affected parties' presentations has a series of pictures which are all a combination of irrelevant because they're not part of our neighborhood, of our Wainwright Drive neighborhood, or they're showing pictures from inside the clusters and representing them as outward facing houses. It's just simply not the case. All these clusters around are inward oriented. There are a few instances where you get to see the backs of some houses from Wainwright Drive. But again, those are the exception to the rule. And I would doubly echo Damien's concerns about RELAC. It was said before that Vantage Hill is not a cluster, but the new development would be a cluster. And I think by the deed, that means it needs to be connected to RELAC because the piping is running through their property. And
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Graham. Moving on to Rick Griffiths. Rick Griffiths.
Trying to unmute him now. There we go. Hang on.
I'm on.
There we go.
Hello, sir.
Hi there.
All right, your 3 minutes start.
I'm gonna fly. So thank you for hearing me. At the November 17th, 2020 meeting, that's the one where DRB voted 4-3 to approve the project in concept. Mr. Woods began our section 52 minutes into the meeting with the statement, "We have the Vantage Hill condominium infill project." This would be a direct reference to the tear down infill governing document. In so doing, it should be noted for the record that the DRB did refer to a guideline. In addition, the statement negates the statement that was said, "The failure to state a guideline is in itself a misapplication of guidelines." That is untrue. The irony is that the DAC had requested on numerous occasions what applicable guidelines were. Furthermore, having listened to other DRB meetings, they seldom specify the applicable guidelines. So if it weren't for the fact that there's a time limit on submitting appeals, the DRB could be inundated with such requests. Additional concerns raised at the November 17th meeting included this project is a departure from the rest of the neighborhoods in Reston. All the clusters have inward spaces. Nowhere are houses phasing out onto the streets, and the density. Nevertheless, it was voted to approve the concept 4-3. Having considered those things, time doesn't allow, but I can give you the timestamps where that was actually covered. So none of these points that have been raised are new information. In other words, the appeal is invalid. That's pretty much what I'm going to say. The only other thing is we're talking about this development possibly downgrading the adjacent neighborhoods. I guarantee that the deteriorating pool as it exists will downgrade adjacent properties. I'm finished.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And just to be clear on this, the appeal was already accepted 2 months ago. Tonight we're reviewing the application de novo, which just means anew. So just to be clear for the affected parties. So moving on to Scott Pringle.
Hi, this is Scott. Can you hold on one second?
Scott, you got an echo going on?
Yep,
So I don't know.
got it fixed. Is that better?
Perfect. Yep, perfect.
Okay, this is Scott Pringle. I speak in support of the Vantage Hill proposal. The design of this new development has been through many iterations with the Reston Design Review Board. In collaboration with the DRB, changes were made in response to recommendations to ensure compliance with all the guidance and standards for the project. The resulting design meets or exceeds all of those requirements, including the architectural design, landscaping and tree removal, and site plan. In addition to the objective requirements, there are at least two subjective requirements. One is new development should not detrimentally impact the surrounding areas, and the other is should be in harmony with the Reston master plan and surrounding communities. The proposed design will have a positive, not detrimental impact on the neighborhood and community. Removing dilapidated and unused elements in favor of additional housing for a growing community will benefit both Lake Anne and Reston as a whole. The Reston master plan emphasizes a village center focused lifestyle. These additional residences will bolster the businesses in the Lake Anne Village Center, helping to bring it back to prominence. This design is also in harmony with the surrounding neighborhoods. It balances inward facing, and when I say inward facing, I mean towards Vantage Hill Road, and outward facing elements consistent with surrounding communities. Like other clusters, including Mediterranean, the vast majority of homes face either each other or the interior roadway on Vantage Hill Road. As shown in the Reston Neighborhoods PDF, the few homes that face Wainwright are in harmony with homes in Waterview, which you see, I believe, on page 27, Clubhouse on page 28, and these are all close neighborhoods. Governor's Square on pages 29 and 33, Courts on page 31, and Mediterranean on pages 34 and 35. Further, the design improves the green trail access, providing an enhanced opportunity for desirable interparcel relationships as recommended in the overall design guidance. Through collaboration with the DRB, the proposal has met or exceeded all design guidance, has preserved the harmony of the surrounding neighborhoods, and supports the Reston master plan. Approving this proposal is in the best interest of the Lake Anne neighborhoods and Reston as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Linda Morley. Linda Morley.
And she's on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, Linda.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We are here. Oh, shoot. We are here revisiting the Vantage Hill Pool Property Development Proposal because of appeals made about the DRB's original decision to approve. The appeal argued the board failed to specify guidelines when making their decision and that therefore the redevelopment design guidelines were misapplied. The guidelines state an objective, quote, to ensure redevelopment of property continues the existing contextual balance and is in harmony with and enhances neighboring properties in the community, end quote. And they state that, quote, the design of the project should be appropriate for the community and compatible with the immediate neighborhood, end quote. These guidelines are completely subjective and would be difficult to defend given differing opinions. DRB has decided once to grant conceptual approval. There is nothing in the guidelines giving reason to change that decision. There have been many DRB discussions about inward versus outward facing homes, the density of the units, and the need for green space for congregating. I cannot find any mention of these things in the guidelines. And to be clear, there is no consistency in the area related to these elements. But I don't think any of these elements are truly the issue at hand. In my opinion, those speaking against the proposal or against any development at all, they don't want change. They prefer the dilapidated pool and decaying structures to anything that might replace them. Complaints have been listened to and numerous adjustments have been made, but none of the adjustments appease those who are complaining because nothing would. At some point, something must change with the pool property. Given that no one has funds to convert the property to a park, what other redevelopment would you suggest? The proposal is to add homes to a residential area. The proposed homes are in scale and of similar density compared to surrounding homes. Each neighborhood in the area has its unique architecture and layout. This development will be no different. There are only a handful of individuals speaking out against this application. They feel as though they will be negatively affected, but what really are the negative effects compared to the benefits to countless others? There are numerous individuals and businesses for whom this development would have a positive impact. The rejuvenation of the pool area would benefit hundreds of individuals in the Vantage Hill community. It would also benefit businesses in the area that are more acutely struggling after this past year. It would help in a small part to ease housing shortages. It resolves the pool property situation. Only a very few are supposedly negatively affected by a change in view, which most likely will be enhanced by the new landscape trees. So while applying guidelines about what is appropriate for the community, can the board truly decide in good conscience that the very few complaints should have more sway than the hundreds of others who welcome this change? Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then last is Parker Gallagher.
Good evening. As an affected party, I write in support of the proposed development at Vantage Hill and believe you can approve it, as the DRB has done once before, because the development continues the existing contextual balance and is in harmony with and enhances the neighboring properties in the community. It is sensitive to the effect on or alteration of the established character of the neighborhood, and it will not detrimentally impact neighboring properties with its pedestrian or vehicular traffic, noise, lighting, and other associated activities. There are 6 clusters with entrances on Wainwright north of North Shore Drive. That's all of the entrances on North Shore on Wainwright. There is a universal and indisputable truth, and I have 4 pages of pictures that I have submitted, that every single one of these clusters have unit entrances onto the roadways through the cluster facing parking. Our design is entirely consistent with this undisputable truth. There also are design elements where residents in 3 of the clusters prefer to have entrances directly onto Wainwright Drive, and I've submitted pictures of that. Our proposal is consistent with that design element. So I'm going to focus my remarks on pages 6 and 7 of what I've submitted in writing for the record. What are some of the benefits of our proposed design? It replaces sick and dying trees along the pool property with healthy new growth while preserving much of the leafy, majestic canopy of the mature trees specifically preserved by design along the Lake Hand Trail and buildings 25 and 27. It is simply true that replacing sick and dying trees along the pool property with the volume of healthy new growth in the proposed design will enhance the neighborhood over decades. Regarding positive impacts on the established character of the neighborhood, remember why 152 unit owners at Vantage Hill are requesting your approval for doing this. I refer you to my previous remarks. We are not profiteering developers. We are your neighbors, fellow residents, trying to responsibly raise funds to preserve our affordable community from the ravages of aging infrastructure. Doing so will have positive impacts referenced in the guidelines. Water management. There is no dispute that the proposed sophisticated water management system up to current code will be an improvement from the 1960s and environmentally outdated surface runoff from the current pool hardscape. Property values, replacing the unsightly unused pool with higher value new homes, selling at a premium per square foot value would enhance property values in the immediate area by raising the comparable sales values. Addressing Vantage Hill infrastructure costs will help us to preserve our property values without proceeds. If our property values go down, it'll reduce comps in the immediate neighborhood. Open space. Our design includes community open space.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
All right, thank you. So those are the affected parties from what I have a list of. I believe that is all, staff, correct?
Yep, I believe that's what we have.
Okay. If there's any other people on that didn't register, just raise your hand now, or else then I'm going to close the affected party section of this. All right, I don't see any. All right, so moving on to back to the applicants. So if you guys could unmute all the applicants, please. And we will go around the room and ask, or the virtual room in this instance, and ask any questions we may have. Mike B, did you have any questions for the applicant about the application we were looking at?
I did not, sir. We've seen this one a few times, so I'm good at this point. Thank you.
All right, Jim, I know you're new to this project, and I know you actually you live right around the area. So, do you have any questions about it?
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
along Vantage Hill Road, the current street parking that's there, is that going to go away, or is that going to be preserved?
We are not proposing any reduction to the width of Vantage Hill, so it would remain.
Okay, and then the width of the, I guess, the current green space from the curb along Vantage Hill Road to the edge of the current parking lot looks like it's being decreased because the fronts of those homes that face Vantage Hill are actually closer. I'm just curious, what is the distance from the curb to the face of those homes facing Vantage Hill?
It would be a minimum of 45 feet with some buildings and portions of all buildings more than 45 feet from the face of curb of Wainwright Drive.
I think he meant.
No, I'm talking about Vantage Hill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me double check that. The existing, oops, sorry. The homes, the face of the new homes will be approximately 16 to 20 feet from the face of curb along Vantage Hill, depending on where it's measured and what portion of the building you're measuring. The existing parking lot, I don't have a dimension handy on that, but I'm gonna approximate it at 25 feet from the face of Vantage Hill. So it would move, 6 to 8 feet closer. The building face would be 6 to 8 feet closer than the parking lot today.
And what are the trees that you're proposing planting along Vantage Hill? What species of tree is that?
We have not selected a species yet, but they would be large canopy trees. So think of like red maples and things like that.
Okay, so it'd be consistent with the maples that are currently in Mediterranean cluster.
That would be the goal. Yes, sir.
I don't have any other questions.
Great, thanks, Jim. Bruce, do you have any questions?
I do not have any.
So I have a couple. Obviously, once again, full disclosure, I live in Colson Cluster, right next door. So this development impacts kind of my direct neighborhood. I think the toughest things that I've been going through with this development is the biggest reason why people have been arguing against it is because of the my biggest thing is the precedent that it sets for neighborhoods that have private infrastructure that is underutilized or is dilapidated and then leads to redevelopment. I can think of a number of clusters that have either private tennis courts, private playgrounds, just a private wooded space that maybe just becomes a financial burden to maintain. And then they come to us and say, well, we want to redevelop it into houses because it's a housing area. So therefore we could provide more housing. And it just gets, I'm afraid it could lead to a slippery slope with different things. So that's kind of the biggest concern that I have. The second thing is the outdoor space for each individual unit is really non-existent. And it kind of leads to those alleyways and those balconies and the lack thereof any sort of private backyard or any space to even, safely put a grill out and be able to grill. So what I would like, and I know we're not approving the design tonight. I do like overall the design concept. I think you guys have definitely worked with us, and I just still think it needs a little more tweaking, from my personal opinion. A couple clarifications that I wanted to make on some of the affected parties, because I know they're listening in. A lot of what we're talking about with this inward facing is, and the one application, the one I think it was Mr. I forget which one it was exactly. The last person we heard from, Mr. Gallagher. Inward facing means inward facing toward the neighborhood, and every picture you sent shows the neighborhood inward facing to the interior infrastructure of that neighborhood. And none of those homes are facing towards Wainwright Drive. They're facing towards either their drive aisles that are interior to the neighborhood. And that's our point. That's what we were trying to kind of push.
That's not true.
It's 100% true. I live in the neighborhoods. I know exactly. There's not a single front door besides one in Colson Cluster. That's not really even. It's down lower. That fronts Wainwright Drive. So what's tricky with it is I think the density of it is still, in my opinion, a little too high. And unfortunately, the board is a subjective process. And, you know, we do have guidelines that we follow, but then there also still are subjective guidelines that have to be taken into consideration. And unfortunately, that's part of the situation that we're forced to kind of be in to make these decisions. So those are kind of my initial things. For the applicant, the only thing I would say, and for some reason it drives me, I just always see it, is the Wainwright sidewalk. And I know we have 2 of these sidewalks that are proposed. There's one in front of the buildings and then one along the street. You guys you guys want to move it for some reason. And I don't know, I guess maybe to try to create more trees, but I actually think there would be a better buffer if we just left the sidewalk where it is along Wainwright Drive currently. And just keep that same 45-foot setback you guys have, and just keep the trees on the one side of the sidewalk in between the 2, and not try to, because every single time a developer puts trees along a little 2-foot median, they always die. They always, they don't have enough room to live there. They grow into the road. They just get in the way. So I would recommend just looking at that one more time. I don't think there's any reason to relocate that sidewalk along Wainwright Drive.
That's certainly doable. So I don't know if I should be interrupting or not, but that's
no. You're fine. You're fine. You definitely. I just think it would be. It just doesn't make sense to me to spend all that money to tear up all that concrete to then try to force trees to fit in a 2-foot median. I just don't think it's going to work. So I would rather utilize the new. You know, I guess for there, you guys must be bringing in a little bit of fill for in between the house and that sidewalk now, because it does kind of have a significant grade. So utilize that good fill dirt that you're going to bring in to, you know, plant, you know, all new landscaping and stuff to kind of create that buffer that we would like to see. Beyond those comments.
So
yeah,
Michael.
go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, isn't that, I have similar concerns along Vantage Hill Road, that sidewalk going up there and a much smaller buffer is basically the same concern. That
correct? Yes, it is. Same,
you know, what are you
there.
going to get to grow in that narrow space? I mean, those trees will be fine when they're young, but we have a situation along Vantage Hill Road where these delivery box trucks are constantly taking branches off of trees.
We've the dimensions that we're talking about for the planting strip, the sidewalk along Wainwright and Vantage Hill are both going to be under the current design in the neighborhood of 8 feet from the back of curb. And so we think that's relatively generous as by way of comparison, and what you typically would see in Arlington and some other more urban areas is you see mature trees in 4 and 5 foot landscape strips. So we feel pretty good about it, but as to the sidewalk on Wainwright, that's certainly something we're willing to keep looking at.
And Michael, this is Rob Schuman with Vantage Hill.
Yep.
Can I ask why, when people are talking about open space per individual unit, why is Vantage Hill ignored? 80% of the residents of Vantage Hill have no personal space. Okay, and we live here too. Okay.
Yeah, how many grill locations do you guys have throughout your community?
We have 3 grills, maybe 4. Okay, and
you have a ton, but right.
Those are a community amenity on a community space, and this development could easily have grills just the same way. Why is this different?
Vantage Hill is a multifamily development. This is a single family attached. So the development is different.
But we are part of the neighborhood. It is a characteristic of the neighborhood. And we represent almost half of the houses in the neighborhood in these 4 clusters, probably, maybe a third. I don't know exactly. Okay. But it's this, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit upset here, but when this discussion all happens about the character of the neighborhood, Vantage Hill itself is never viewed as part of the neighborhood. Okay, and we live here too, right? Okay, and the design guidelines talk about fitting into the neighborhood. So would it be better if these were condominium units and we tried to push 50 condominium units on this spot?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to build a similar building to what you have now, I mean, you know, that could always be an option. I mean, if you know, if you're going down that path, for sure, we could definitely consider something like that. I think,
but I guarantee you,
can we focus on where we are in the application process at this point, which is a discussion among the DRB panel?
yeah, I mean, so going back to kind of, I think I went over what I'm concerned about. I mean, does anyone have any? Mike B, do you have any initial thing, another comments, or Bruce or Jim, any other thoughts? Or
Yeah, I was looking at some of the slides that were put up there from the neighboring clusters, and my concern is the impact of the entrances to the front of these places along Vantage Hill Road. That they're, and I think Vantage Hill condominiums, they're very low key architecturally, and it's nice. It harmonizes. I realize architecturally it's probably outdated, but it seems that when we get into reviewing the architecture for the actual units themselves, that we may be able to keep this in mind, that there might be, you know, some ways to limit, you know, like very tall gables and things like that may be a little more sympathetic to the streetscape along Vantage Hill. You know, just from an architectural standpoint.
yeah, I think the design obviously is forthcoming. I think what we see is a representative idea, and I think I suggested a bunch of comments kind of on the original application that was approved on how we can try to, you know, separate the end units with a little bit more monumental stone, or, you know, they show some stone on just the bottom half, but maybe you wrap it around and kind of create some variation on just the rear facades as well, so we don't just have these big long siding kind of escapade, you know, landscape along the backside. So I think that Robbie, you know, he took good notes on what we did say, and that, you know, I think, I'm sure they're working with their you know, their architect on kind of going forward with the design, but obviously they have to get this site plan kind of approved. But I agree with you, Jim, on the architecture. I think there are ways to kind of make it fit in a little better than maybe it is. But I actually like how the design is going. I like that it's unique. It's you know, it's with the current kind of more modern times that I think design is going, and I do like that.
Yeah, I
think it does fit into Reston.
I would agree with you. I saw this site plan, I think, about a year ago, and certainly they could do worse. But I do think that there's some tweaking that needs to be done.
Yeah, I
think can we focus primarily on the site plan, and however many times this has come up, my view remains that it is a design that mimics tall oaks, which I think is not appropriate for its location in Reston, and that part of it just doesn't change. That alley is not appropriate in this neighborhood. It wasn't appropriate in Tall Oaks. It was a mistake, and someone mentioned this earlier. One of the parties mentioned that getting better doesn't make it good, and that was the precise conclusion that we ultimately recognized with Tall Oaks, and we're being asked to do the same thing here. It gets better, but it doesn't make it good.
Sure, Bruce, I might be able to, I'm not in any way involved with Tall Oaks, but since you was brought up, I'm loosely familiar with it. One of the big differences with Tall Oaks and this site is Tall Oaks has a loop road that runs through it, which I'm sure you've driven down, and maybe that's one of the reasons you're not that big of a fan. But it has both of the new units. It has both fronts and rears facing it. So typically when we lay out a site, we might have primary roads and then secondary service roads. The primary roads are where the front doors address, and the secondary roads might be where residents access their garages. That loop road has both. So you're going through, you might see some rears to your left, and then you might see some front doors to your right. This job, the primary roads are Vantage Hill and Wainwright. And then the road that runs through the site is really only accessed by the units themselves. It's not a loop road for anybody else than the people that live there. So in that way, it is a little bit of a different site layout, and it might not have that same feeling that you get with Tall Oaks when you're driving through it, because there's really no reason to drive through the alley unless you live there.
So I think Bruce's biggest concern is just let's say the biggest alleyway you guys really have is between units, 19 and 25, and then 13 and 18, kind of in that middle quadrant. Do you guys happen to know the dimension just from back to back of what those houses are? Just from that roadway is what, maybe 20 feet wide, and then
Aaron should
maybe
be able
5
to
feet on each side.
The alley itself is 23 feet wide, and then the driveways vary, but they are 4 feet at the minimum. So you're looking at 31 feet, 31 in that neighborhood, which is we're working on a project.
And then the rear of these houses would be, since they're 3 stories with that garage, they're also 30 feet plus whatever roof gable, or roughly 30, maybe 27 feet plus whatever roof is kind of going on.
Yeah, whatever the slope of the roof is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and what's tricky is we tell you, don't get too close to Vantage Hill Road, but then we say don't put them too close together. So I know why you guys are struggling with it.
Can I make one other point?
Yeah.
Unit 22. If there was a way to do what you did between unit 25 and I guess 26, to create a green space, that might help to ease the massing of that block of units, so that it's a little more sympathetic to what's right across the street, in Mediterranean.
So like more have a group of 3 and a group of 4, or
rather than a group of 7.
Yeah.
Because, Mediterranean has a pretty pleasing, streetscape along there where it's going in and out, and it really breaks the massing down. And you did that between 25 and 26, which really helps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good idea, a good comment. And I think I've asked this question before, Robbie. 29 is I know it's better than 31 or 32, but it's kind of like a car sales negotiation. Is there any way to get this down where we can maybe get the density down a little lower, or is 29 basically the limit from a feasibility standpoint?
It's pretty darn close to the limit. My question back at you would be, taking 1 or 2 units away, I don't believe would make the site live or breathe any differently than the site would this way. I don't think it would make any impact noticeable to anything, just having 1 less unit. But yeah, certainty is actually have high value to us, especially at this point in the process. So if you told us right now that if we deleted 1 or 2 unit, that we had a path forward, well, then I would seriously consider that. but well, I'm still hearing a lot of subjective opinions. I'm not quite sure that's going to do it. But if that's what you're telling me, then that's something we can seriously consider.
I mean, I personally don't have a problem with the development as it's currently pictured. I get it. I understand some of the concerns that are being raised, density, et cetera. I mean, I think let's not lose sight of the fact that what's there now is currently an otherwise unutilized and 7 years vacant or otherwise dilapidated pool structure and complex. I mean, that's got to be part of the lens through which we view this thing. I hear Bruce's point. I get that. But, you know, I get it. I see.
Yeah,
it.
I guess the tricky thing, Mike, is that, you know, if you look, so we just talked about, you know, the dimension between the houses there at let's say it's 31 feet from back to back house. Well, then you take, okay, the balconies are probably 3 feet. So then all of a sudden now the house is, you know, when you're on your back deck, you could throw something 24 feet. You know, I can't think of any development in Reston where you can, you know, be out on your back deck and have that much invasion of, you know, of privacy. And maybe it's just that you get rid of the balconies completely, and maybe that helps keep that alleyway a little bit more free, and they can vary the facade technique. And obviously that's part of the design that we're not talking about now, but I just think that dimension is so close that it creates this illusion of much higher density than maybe what the site can fit. And I think that's part of the issue that Bruce has with it, and I do to a certain extent.
Yep.
Michael, it might be worth.
That's something we can certainly consider, like on the architectural portion of the review. I kind of consider the balconies part of that, but those comments, we have noted them, and that's something we can certainly consider.
It's also, there's kind of a tension here because there's a little bit of a push-pull, right? Because one of the things that we've talked about throughout the duration of this process is concerns about seeing the alleys, right? We want to limit views down the alleys. Well, you know, alleys are the business end of a development, and so what we've attempted to do is kind of compact the alleys as much as possible so that they're really visible from very few vantage points, and we kind of like where we ended up there. But I hear you. There's a tension, right, between those two things.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you guys. I go back and forth every time on this one because I like where it's going, and it's like I feel like it's so close, but then it's almost, then I have these other thoughts that come in my head about the kind of the precedent it might set with other neighborhoods, and that's, you know, and the density overall is struggling me. But does anyone have a feeling?
If I could about the precedent, I have one thought.
I think you could decrease that alley feeling by breaking down the density of that group facing Vantage Hill and the group right behind it on the other side of the alley. I think it would go a long way.
Yeah, I think that's so, you know, if is there any way to spread out potentially 13, 14, 15, put a little, you know, maybe try to get a 15, 20 foot space in between and slide it over, and maybe lose, you might have to, well, I guess you can't go too close to the Vantage Hill building.
Yeah,
but maybe you
22.
Maybe you lose a unit, but maybe lose 22 completely. And I think what they're worried about is that, you know, they make this change and then that, you know, we still are kind of against the overall development. But us as a board, maybe we can approve in concept and say remove, you know, I would even almost say the same thing along Wainwright Drive. You could remove unit, you know, 4, or spread out that stack of 8 and spread it out to be 2 stacks of 4. That could help kind of break down some of that alleyway feel. I mean, obviously they don't really have it between 1 and 13. You know, that alleyway doesn't really exist there because, you know, they turn the houses sideways. But it redevelops itself back on unit 12, 11, 10, 9. Would that be something you guys would consider, Robbie? Aaron?
That's something we can consider and play with, but I kind of go back to the certainty thing because those are pretty minor adjustments. If you're able to make some spaces between those buildings, is that going to do it? Because, you know, I guess I'd assume you'd send us back and we'd come back for another conceptual hearing a month or 2 from now. with maybe only those changes and shifting the sidewalk on Wainwright, which I have no problem with. I mean, is the board, in agreement that they could support a project with those adjustments?
I think we need to discuss it here. So, I mean, Bruce, I think you're obviously against the alleyway. If we somehow break up the masses that create these alleyways, would you be interested in?
Yeah, no, I agree that if to do that, I'm imagining that you talk about perhaps reducing the density even a little bit. So breaking that up does two things in that regard. So yes, I'd be open to that.
Okay.
I mean, one more thing.
Yep.
We have progressed the architecture internally, and I think some of the things that I'm going to present to you, assuming we get there, I'm hoping you'll be receptive to, and I think we'll also address some of the board's concerns about these massing of buildings. I understand you're also asking about maybe breaking them up, but I think some of the ideas that we've come up with, how to treat the facade specifically, might articulate and individualize some of the units in a way that I'm hoping you'll respond positively to.
Okay. Well, now you threw out a little teaser out there. It's like, what?
Did some work on it.
Now I want to see those.
It's sitting at my desk staring at me. I'd love to show it to somebody.
So, I mean, what if we, Aaron, from a site standpoint, if we started trying to spread out these and maybe just eliminate, let's say we had to eliminate one central unit and then spread them apart, or is there any way to spread them apart without losing a unit? Do you see that as, to get a similar space, like not quite as much as what you have between 25 and 26, obviously, because that's at least 40, maybe 35 feet. But do you have a way to maybe get at least 15, 20 feet, and still maybe keep your same density? I know I'm often asking questions off the cuff here.
I think I'm trying to do some eyeball math here.
Yeah, because I'm looking at unit 1, let's say unit 1, 2, and 3, maybe
Shift
even
north
4.
a little bit.
We were able to shift them up the page.
Yep.
Right. I'm looking at some of our constraints. I think what we're not seeing on the screen right now are some of the infrastructure elements that we need to get through the site. And bear with me here. I'm thinking out loud. I would say, I think unit 1 could probably shift north somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 feet, relatively easy. I would say unit 8 could shift south another, 4 or 5 feet. And I would say unit 19 could shift west a few feet, and unit 25 could shift east a couple of feet. So I think, between 22 and 23, for instance, we could probably get to 6 to 8 feet. And then between 4 and 5, for instance, we could probably get to 10. Those aren't the exact numbers you guys have been talking about, but I do think there's probably a way to break this up a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to get closer because I'm thinking with a lot of the developments they have, let's say they have a lot of the local communities, at least I know, I speaking of the Colson cluster specifically, we have carports that, my house looks directly at the back of a carport, but I have probably about 40 feet, maybe 30 feet, 35 feet till it, and I'm able to, there's, azalea bushes, there's a big tulip magnolia tree there, you're able to still grow stuff in between to kind of create that separation, and it still appear that it's kind of in a forest, kind of forested area, which is what all the surrounding neighborhoods kind of have surrounding them. And maybe that would help, I think that would help break it up. So, I mean, I think the more I've talked about it, I think I could get on board if, if we dropped it 2 units, if we, let's say, eliminated unit 5 and unit 22 and spread them out that extra 5-6 feet on the top there and the extra 8 feet, and we got a total of 30 feet between these units almost, and we went down to 27 units, I would be okay to kind of do an approval with the in concept in that manner to kind of help break up the site. Now, obviously, the other board members would kind of have to get behind that, but then that way it would kind of give you that positive. You would have the in concept approval, Robbie, to be able to kind of keep moving, but we'd have to drop 2 units from it. And if the other people would agree to it.
Could I throw out a suggestion too, just something to think about? The 30 feet dimension, Michael, that you just mentioned feels like a lot. It's sort of out of the realm of what I can say with confidence right now that we could make work, but I think we could say with confidence that 20 feet in those 2 areas we could make work. If that is, I don't want to speak for Robbie, but just from a layout standpoint, I would be more comfortable.
What is the width on these units though right now?
It's 20. It's 20.
20, right? So I guess what I was hoping is I could take the 20 and then add, slide them up to be able to get to that closer to 30. I just worry you don't want to make it too small because then it may or may not, be a successful green intervention. I'm kind of thinking like I like the space between unit 12 and units 13 and 14, right? That I don't know what that dimension is there, but that's a good kind of quality space. And so that's what I'm trying to create kind of between these buildings to try to give you guys say, hey, if we can just drop it, 2 units and be able to spread these apart and get close to that 30 feet, you guys can keep moving forward full steam ahead.
It's just an FYI, 12 to 13 is about 30 feet. So good eye on that.
Okay. Yeah. So I just think that gives it a better usable space because I do think, you don't want to leave 10 feet and then you really haven't created that open kind of concept that we're trying to get from a plant, allow landscaping to be able to be planted and go through it, which obviously we don't have a landscaping plan. So we'll go over that in the future, hoping that we get there. Could the other board members kind of get behind that, Bruce? What do you think on those kind of ideas?
That was consistent with what I was moving toward, yes.
Okay. Jim, what do you think of that? Because you brought up the idea of this spacing. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you joined on the board to be able to promote it. I mean, what do you think of that?
I really think that breaking down the density, and you have the room to do it, is really going to help, get this thing, going with these adjacent, clusters. I'm in support of it.
Okay, so let me see if Mike, are you good with that? I'm assuming you've been kind of on board from the beginning.
Yeah.
So
No, I was in favor of the iteration before we had this. So absolutely. I think additional green space is certainly going to work towards alleviating some of the folks' concerns, and hopefully it's a path forward for everybody. So I'm in.
Can I make one more suggestion at the risk of talking too much? And Robbie may virtually kick me under the virtual table here, but these suggestions all make a lot of sense. I don't know exactly how you plan to word the motion or whatever, if that's where we head, but maybe focusing on the massing and the layout more than the unit count. I mean, there may be a way to get to these breaks that we're talking about without losing units or without losing 2 units, right? So maybe it would be great if we had the flexibility to figure out to kind of hit your goals, independent of the unit count if possible.
I was going to make that same suggestion. I wondered if we could say up to 2 units, just so that, Robbie has the flexibility. I mean, he's still got to make this work. And I know he hasn't evaluated it yet, but if it could say up to 2, so if we accomplish the objective, maybe with the loss of 1 unit, that would potentially still satisfy everyone. I think we all know what you're trying to achieve, and maybe that could be achieved with up to 2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we could word it. Aaron, one more question. Between 25 and 26, is that what's that? 25 feet, 30 feet? What is there?
That's actually about 30 feet. It's pretty similar to 12 to 30.
Yes. So I think the way we could word it is that as long as we can if you can split up the massings to be able to, but still maintain those existing 30-foot buffers as well between units. You know, I don't want to say don't lose a unit and then you guys push 25 too close to 26, then all of a sudden now it's only, you know, 15 feet from those two. You know, if we can keep 30 feet between them, I you know, I don't know the set, you know, roughly what Aaron's saying. I believe you might have to lose 2 units, but we can definitely word it where as long as we keep 30 feet between kind of these massings along Wainwright and Vantage Hill to help break down, not only will it help break down the massing along those streets, but it will also break down the alleyway creation that, you know, is going to be on this backside of these homes as well. And then with what Robbie's saying about the design that's forthcoming, the materials should hopefully break that up a little bit more. So without further ado, I'm going to try to word a motion and see how we can do it here. So I'll make a motion to, in concept, approve the application with the following stipulations: that units 1, 2, 3, and 4 be separated from units 5, 6, 7, and 8 by a minimum buffer of 30 feet, with the potential of loss of 1 unit, and that the same be done along units 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, be split around unit 22 with a 30-foot buffer between units, to kind of mimic what's existing between 25 and 26 and 13 and 12, to keep those existing 30-foot buffers as well between units. And that would approve this in concept, the site plan, and then also what was the other thing you guys had approval for? Site plan and density. So density would be no more, you know, require at least to get those buffers with the potential loss of 2 units.
May I make just one question? And Aaron, I know that you're kind of looking at these dimensions on the fly. And I don't know if this is acceptable or not, but could it be between, you know, 25 to 30 feet? Only because Aaron's looking at a plan and kind of, you know, kind of guessing a little bit, but I would just ask that.
Yeah, I'd like to see 30 feet because I worry
Right,
that 25 is
understand.
it's not gonna be able. I mean, I can give you a range of 30 to 35 feet.
Well, I don't think that's going to be helpful.
And that way, if you want to go more, that would be grand.
Yeah,
I just think 25 is going to be too potentially too little of a space to be able to get too much to kind of prosper and grow.
Well,
So I think I'd like to stick with a minimum of 30 feet, because I think based on what he's saying, it can be done. If you guys come back and say you can only get 29 feet, then, you know, I think we'll be okay with that. But this would, Aaron, I mean, do you, from your initial gut feeling, you think you can get that 30 feet with the potential reduction of two units?
It's going to be pretty tight.
can we say approximately 30 feet?
Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly make every effort to get there. It would just a little bit of flexibility, you know, if we get close enough, you know, would be.
Okay. Yeah, we'll say within 30 feet, within 10%.
Okay, that would be fine.
And they get the sales price of the end units because you created 4 more end units.
Yeah, but they cost us more money, so we actually don't make anything more in those.
They're more desirable.
Yeah, maybe they'll sell quicker. I don't know, but I do think, all jokes aside, I think that'll definitely help the massing break up along those streets and just create a little bit more in harmony with the existing neighborhood. So there's a motion on the table. I think staff has the wording that I'm going for. We'll review the meeting minutes before it's sent out to make sure it's exactly worded the way I'm picturing it. Do I hear a second?
Michael, a comment from me.
Yep.
You specified a break in the massing between units 1 to 8 specifically, and I think you were, whether purposefully or not, a little on the vague side with regard to where the break would occur between 19 to 25. I was going to.
Well, I kind of said around unit 22.
Right. Do you want to say similarly around unit 4 or 5 for the other bank? That way, there's some flexibility in what they might be able to make work, understanding we've got some grading concerns along that side anyways.
Right,
It
like
might-
they might have to eliminate unit 5 instead of unit 4
Exactly.
or something to make it
Exactly my
work.
point.
Yeah, that's fine. Around that area
There you
to get to the 30-foot buffer to split these bigger sections up.
That's the case. Second.
All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, all those in favor, say aye. I'll say aye.
Aye.
Any against? And any abstentions? No. So the motion passes 4-0. All right, guys. I look forward to seeing the designs.
Yes,
I think,
indeed.
you guys are moving forward, and I like the designs you guys have, and I'm excited to see what you guys have come up with, Robbie. And we will, I guess, hopefully maybe hear you next board meeting, or maybe the following month after.
We're going to get working. We'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
So much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, so moving on in the agenda, I think that was the last thing. I think we had talked about maybe adding something to the agenda, Cam, but I don't think we could. And I think we'd rather get a little bit more information from the RA board on it. So I think we are good to have a motion to adjourn, if I'm not mistaken.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Great. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
you.
Thank you, staff.
Been a pleasure there, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a good night,
Likewise.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, y'all.
Good night.